So we're just going live on Facebook right now as we wait for some attendees to join on Zoom. All right, and we are live on Facebook. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. Welcome to this month's Tamil Innovator Spotlight. So the Tamil Innovator Spotlight is an online series that puts the spotlight on individuals from the global Tamil community who are building great products, services, and initiatives. Our latest event is brought to you in partnership with mystartupdojo.com and tamilculture.com. And by the way, just as a bit of a teaser, if you like free things, you're definitely going to want to stick around until the end because we have some pretty cool surprises. Before we get into things, my name is Angelina Narendran. I'm excited to be your host today. I'm the program director of mystartupdojo.com, host of the Young at Heart show, and two-time World Robotics champion. So really excited to get into this. Now, without further ado, I'm so excited to welcome our featured speaker for this event, Karan Shanmugarajah, the CEO of WealthKernel. So before I jump into your incredible bio, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me. I do need to ask you what a two-time robotics world champion is. Yeah. I will ask you that by the end of this conversation.
Okay, we'll definitely touch on that. So just to introduce Karan and his incredible background, he's the co-founder and CEO of WealthKernel, an API platform that provides infrastructure to savings and investment companies. WealthKernel raised a $6 million Series A last year, and Karan is also the portfolio manager at Barclays in London, overseeing over $500 million in client assets. Previously, he was a member in the North American Equity Committee and a voting member of the Selection Committee responsible for multi-asset reference portfolio across the UK and Europe. All around, very, very interesting background in the finance space, and now spearheading a very, very cool company, again, in this space. So thank you so much for joining us today.
A pleasure. Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Awesome. So before we get into it, why don't you tell us a little bit about WealthKernel and how it all began?
So to be clear, I'm not at Barclays anymore. I was at Barclays. I've left Barclays to about now 5 years ago to start WealthKernel. So where WealthKernel came from, so I looked at, so my background is managing investments. That's what I did at Barclays as a portfolio manager. And while I was there, there was trends in our sector about the space digitizing and the need for infrastructure to sort of catch up in the space. So I appreciate most of your audience, isn't really in the like we call it the plumbing. It's kind of boring, but we kind of refer to it like as the plumbing for our sector. It's how if you think about it, like how if you ever use a discount brokerage or if you have like a TSFA in Canada, TSFA, and you purchase something in that portfolio, how does it get from your account to the stock exchange? The routing of your funds, the shares back to you, that's what we call the plumbing, and that's what our company kind of does. And when I was at Barclays being a very large British bank that's been around forever, I recognized that the infrastructure we had there wasn't really suited for the next generation of digital companies. And you'll see some of these companies in the media, not our clients, but kind of a precursor for like the trend that's happening, like with Robinhood and people investing in shares on your phone. All that's kind of made possible with kind of behind the scenes companies, kind of like us, enabling those type of businesses to do that. So that's kind of where the company got started from.
So can you take me through kind of the story from um, when you began the company to where you are now? So first of all, when did you realize that there was potentially a problem that you could solve through WealthKernel? What was that like? And then how did that become WealthKernel?
Yeah, like for me, the idea came again because I worked in the sector. So I'd literally be sitting on a desk in this big office building in Canary Wharf here in London, and you recognize how manual it is, right? Like if something went wrong on a trade, I'd pick up the phone, and maybe on the other side, someone pick up the phone in Glasgow, which is a city in Scotland where the back office is. Um, Although it's technically the same country, but not really. It's a bit complicated, the UK English and Scotland thing. And there's a lot of, someone told me that for every trade or for every PM like me, there's about 30 people supporting me indirectly or directly. And that's a lot of people, that's a lot of people doing stuff. And obviously because of that, and the sort of low usage of automation, you can kind of see where the opportunities lie. Technology allowed for that sort of automation, but also like it's not just like, okay, we can do it faster and cheaper, but you can deliver a different level of service. Now more and more people are interested in shares and investing in the stock market, and the minimums have kind of come down. It's become much more approachable, and the fees have come down. It's partly because of this sort of automation. I was managing money for mostly really, really rich people, like multimillionaires, etc. Um, and if you want to bring that level of service down to someone, let's say $100 or £100, the infrastructure cannot be the same. You can't have 30 people shuffling paper in another city. That just wouldn't work.
So did you have some sort of a technical background? How were you able to actually begin to address the problem?
No, I'm not technical. My background's finance, but I did cover tech stocks. So I started my career in sell side equity research, but covering like nothing remotely as glamorous as tech, paper and forestry and fertilizer companies out of Montreal. Where that's like the sector you get there. Like I was just an intern there for a few months. Did that for like 9 months before coming to the UK. But when I came to Barclays, I covered a lot of tech and financials, and so the trends are there, and sort of I knew enough about tech that to see what it was, and I went kind of back to school. I want to say school, like I went to like a continuous education course to kind of get my head back into tech and learn the basics of it. And then I obviously recruited people who knew a hell of a lot more about tech than I did. So I met my co-founder at Barclays, Joe Campbell, and another friend of mine from Montreal who'd been living here in the UK, Yannick Brunner. And I kind of reached out to him, told him, I have this idea. Those guys subsequently quit their jobs and followed me in. Till this day, I'm probably one of the least knowledgeable people of the tech that we deal with relative to the people that work in the company. So yeah, so to answer your question, I don't know that much about tech. I just got smarter people than me to work with me.
All right. And just to kind of get a better understanding of how the business progressed over time, if you had to pinpoint maybe three milestones that really kind of shaped Wealth Simple, what would they be?
Um, Milestones. Getting the business off the ground in itself was quite difficult. Without going into too many of the details, it has to do with like visas and all that. Being a Canadian out in the UK, um, getting the company started was actually in itself a huge feat. We needed to get investment from this venture capital company, Seed Camp, which then allowed me to resign from Barclays to get an entrepreneur visa to get started. And I actually seriously considered going back to Canada and maybe starting this company in Waterloo or Toronto. But luckily, this VC took a chance on us, Seed Camp, who's now become one of the most successful VCs in Western Europe. They have, I think, 6 unicorns in their portfolio, by far. And once I did that, that in itself, just getting that investment that allowed me to resign from Barclays and start was a huge milestone. I just remember how frustrating that process was. I've been plotting, how can I do this for a year, and I finally got there. Milestone number 2, I would say, is when we first, I'd say when we first raised capital, because that not capital. So when we first got paid by a customer, that was definitely a milestone day when we first got revenue, because then that's like you have an arm's length objective firm paying you for something you built, and you haven't like hustled your way to get this revenue. That was a really momentous day. You know, a firm, another financial services company paying you. That was huge. What other things? If I point to two or three things actually. When we became a custodian in the UK, so custodian is like someone that's responsible for the management of the assets of for third parties or individuals. Getting that license in the UK and actually doing that function was a huge milestone. And then lastly, recently closing our Series A, because even to this day, I still struggle to kind of get that through my head a little bit, like the sums of money that we're dealing with. But getting that sort of vote of confidence from our investors and just letting that deal close, huge milestone for us and our business. Just when people uh, vote with their money and show you that level of confidence is huge. So I know it's been a year now, but I still kind of, I pinch myself kind of thinking about that now.
Yeah, and one thing that I'd like to zoom in on is you previously mentioned this, but you're Canadian, but you managed to start and grow a company in a completely different country. So can you tell me a bit about what making that decision was like, number one, and then the experience of building a business in the UK?
Yeah, like to be clear, I'm Tamil Canadian, right? So born in like I'm born in Sri Lanka, Tamil first, then migrated to Canada, Canadian second. And I think that's partly in our blood a little bit, in that you kind of just get used to going to new places and setting up shop and getting to work, I guess. And I think that immigrant mentality goes anywhere. Uh, no, it's not like compared to like the journey that our parents went through. Most, I'm guessing, the most of the listeners here, they can relate to that. Like when you come to England, it's just like they speak the same language, slightly different currency. The weather's a little bit different, but it's not that different. Like you can kind of continue on, and it's like I said, I got quite lucky as well getting into Barclays, being a global bank here, built a network, and then there's a huge Tamil community here as well. Like there's networks. I know like there's a Canadian Tamil Professional Association in Toronto. There's a similar one like here in London. Um, yeah, like it's kind of going back to luck. Like the tech boom is happening here. London's a fintech capital world. I work in finance. Um, and it's just things aligned. And the Tamil network here is pretty good as well. Like people are really nice and uh, they're helpful. Like I have a second cousin out here. Not that she's in tech or finance, but you just kind of find the few like strands you have and you kind of build on it.
Yeah. So I think what would be really interesting to do is to talk about maybe some challenges you faced. We've talked a little bit about the milestones, the wins you've had from, raising that Series A to, even getting started. So can you maybe pinpoint a particular challenge that you have faced over the years and how you overcame it?
Oh gee, should probably prepare for this question better. There's so many, so many. Um, I'm trying to think here. I'm filtering like ones that are probably most relevant for your listeners, I guess. I'd say funding is not funding, but like there's this thing about raising capital and fund founders and how you're perceived to be, right? Like maybe I'm on a tangent here, but one of the things that like I'm not the most like, how should I say it? Like I'm pretty much like not flat, it's probably a negative way to say it, but I'm even keeled is probably a much better way to say it. I don't ever get too hyped. I don't go into a pitch meeting saying like I'm going to disrupt this, and I don't kind of go in there with that sort of cockiness, that sort of MO you would expect from a founder. And that early on, I kind of thought that was a bit of a problem because there's certain expectations of founders of companies when you raise capital. Um, and I kind of overcame that partly by just kind of being true to myself a little bit about that. I have my strengths, I have my weaknesses, and kind of turning some of those weaknesses into strengths as well. Because I'd be very conservative in these pitches. Because I come from banking, you're kind of disciplined not to overestimate too many things, and you're accountable, and there's you make a whole career of like keeping the bar low and over exceeding people's expectations. In VC land, not the case. You don't necessarily go into a meeting and get rewarded for being conservative. In fact, sometimes they might mistaken that for not believing in your idea or whatever. But over time, people kind of recognize that that's just kind of who I am, and it's become a hallmark of me. I'm very just kind of soft-spoken and just slightly conservative, and VCs and the community kind of recognize that. And then now it's just like, well, they kind of just see me as someone who's very straight talking and straight shooting about stuff, and that's brought a lot of credibility with me and other investors, because early years it kind of sucked. I didn't always get the benefit of the doubts, but as you kept hitting your expectations, they're like, oh, fine, the guy kind of does what he says, and he kind of stays with it, and he kind of grinds his way, like grit and grind his way through stuff, like is kind of consistent, like, and that's kind of now become a strength. But early on, it was definitely a bit of a like, maybe I should adopt some more, trying to change up how I speak or present myself slightly different. And this is not like, a race thing or anything. It's just there's certain people who do better when you go in front of an audience and you can project confidence. I'd always been confident. It's just I don't go in with that sort of um, energy that some founders have, and I just never really do that. I don't really get overly excited about anything, or I don't. At the same time, I don't get really negative about stuff. I'm just kind of even keeled through, and that's taken some time to work on that. So.
Right, but I found the takeaway really interesting, and how the way you dealt with it was just being true to yourself. And yeah, I guess that's very cool. That's a very cool message to have.
Yeah, there's no point of apologizing for who you are. Like, sometimes you just tell people, listen, like, I'm not really going to come out here and bang the table about this, but understand this. This is who I am. Resigned from a job doing this, and if I'm here doing this, just because I believe in it. So if you kind of open a line like that, people kind of be like, all right, this guy's, he's serious.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm sure that does get attention. So how did you start conversations with VCs? How did you end up trying to navigate that? Was it eventually, was it that line that opened up doors?
No, well, no, like most, like, I'll be honest, VCs, like, the thing about VCs is you only read about the ones that are successful. You rarely see the ones that are unsuccessful. Like, I think, goddamn, there must have been like must have pitched like 200 people, maybe of that 40, 50 VCs. A lot of them pass on stuff. We had a lot of angel investors. One thing, like, I kind of have like a little spreadsheet about like who I pitched to and the data around it. I had a lot of success raising money from angels, and there was like a profile that worked really well. If they come from finance and I speak to them in person, there's a really good chance they'll invest, assuming they have the money. Okay. And that's partly because our product is really technical. It's not really easy for people to understand what it is in a weird way. They're like, like, I'm sure if you ask my mom what I do, she won't tell you. My brother might not even. My brother will now a little bit, now that he's getting into like investing in marijuana stocks. He'll kind of get what we do. But if you worked in finance and they understood what I was saying and the vocabulary that I was using, they would invest. But if I spoke to VCs, that was a much tougher sell, because a lot of VCs, maybe more than like 3 or 4 years ago, were investing in fintech, predominantly were consumer-related fintechs. So like, think of it like challenger banks. Like, I'm not sure what the situation's like in Canada, but like a lot of fintechs that became really popular are like things that consumers used. Like you said, Wealthsimple in Canada is well known, or like some type of online bank that competed against like the Canadian banks would have been popular. But the companies that provided the infrastructure for them wasn't as popular here at the time, because the VCs themselves didn't understand behind like the second derivative of infrastructure or tech that was being built. And that made it really hard for them to scope out like the opportunity size and how, like, where that market can go. And so I had a really low hit ratio with VCs. But what I realized is that instead of like spraying and praying, find the VCs that have experience in your sector who can appreciate where you're coming from, and then speak to those ones. Obviously, that sounds like a no-brainer, but it's very rare that a VC has experience investing in something that is new, right? By definition, what we're doing is new. So there's very few examples for them to follow. You kind of need them. You need them to give them a proxy to look at. And we got quite lucky that in Germany, maybe 2 years before we raised, what they call banking as a service company raised a ton of capital. And then I kind of had to extrapolate what they were doing and say, well, if they're banking as a service, we're like wealth as a service. And that started to resonate more with VCs, and they started coming on board. Strangely enough, the VC that led around, one of the I guess the person behind it first invested as an angel. And when I told them I was doing our Series A, they just did the whole thing because they were happy with how we were doing processes. And we had interest from other VCs, but I like the fact that they supported me early, and I let them take the whole thing because I like people who back me, and they showed me more confidence earlier than other VCs. And so I have a great relationship with them. So yeah, even though it's a VC that invested, it was kind of built on a personal relationship at first. They put in 100 grand and they backed it up with 6 million. So
6 million. That is a sizable amount to put behind to put behind their thoughts. So
yeah, and
that's
I'm to be
awesome.
clear, like I have like a pretty much like my co-founder Yannick said, like add him to the list because I keep a long list of VCs that have said no to me. Right? And for sure, like I have nothing. One of the motivations for me is to do extremely well, and definitely make a lot of people have some serious regrets about passing. You remember those conversations for a long, long time.
That's fair. That's fair. So how do you deal with the challenges and all the say there are 200 people you talk to, all the 199 or probably less than that, but several no's that you've had. How do you deal with that?
But you don't really think twice about it. I think like anyone that plays sports or anything, like you learn from it, but you can't let it get to you. Like if you're kind of sensitive on that, it's nothing personal. Like they're doing their job, and you have to take like how you learn from it, how you adjust, and you go from it. Like you do take it personal, but not like in a way where you kind of go home and let it screw up your day. Like some days you pitch like 2-3 times and you just got to shake off one and go to the next one. You take the feedback they have, but you can't let it get you like upset you. Like if you're someone that takes rejection or get frustrated, this is a really painful journey. Like it is a lot of pain for 4 months of pitching, saying it, and then and then take. Sometimes the feedback is accurate, and don't blame them, right? Other times it's not, and you just kind of have to just, all right, it's not my day, and just move on. But you kind of take that rejection as fuel, right? One of the VCs I still talk to, even though he didn't like he wanted to invest, but he got boxed out by our current investors, was every time you hear a no, statistically you're closer to hearing a yes. So you just got to take it like that and just go with it. So
That is true. That is true. I've never heard anyone put it that way, but that's a really good way to put it. So
yeah.
have you learned has there been a lesson that's really stuck out to you from these rejections outside of maybe that's the statistical one you just mentioned?
Um.
How do
Lessons.
they fuel you? You mentioned that they fuel you. How do they fuel you?
Oh yeah, like you want to win, and like more importantly, I want the people that invested in us to do really well and beat the other VCs, and bring down a world of pain on the other VCs that didn't invest in us. That's enough fuel for me, right? Like it is what it is. So uh, I don't need much motivation. Like obviously, I have a lot of my own capital, my own sweat equity into this company. I have plenty of motivation to do well. um, yeah, I don't really. Did I understand your question right?
Yeah, yeah. If you could think back through the history of WealthKernel, is there an interesting story that really sticks out to you? Maybe something that seemed like a catastrophe in the moment, but now you look back on it and kind of laugh a little.
Oh, faster in the moment I look back. Um, yeah, we've lost some like some. Okay, so as a startup, you always want to like grow your business. You're looking for revenues, right? Revenues not only give you money to run your business, but more importantly, like it's metrics that you can raise with. And having some big companies as customers are a it's a huge validation of your business, right? And there's been a few times where we've been in not just late stage discussions, but they've actually started paying us funds to use our infrastructure. These are large banks, I would say in the top 5 in the UK. And you spend months at it, for it to fall apart. And you can't help it. You feel frustrated. You kind of lick your wounds about it. But in hindsight, like as painful as those losses are, sometimes you learn a lot about the market you go after, um, in terms how to sell to these companies, what to look for in sales, um, and who your customers are, and that has sort of shaped our business in a weird way. Like we're unapologetically focused on startups and smaller businesses, and using APIs to facilitate that. And we often ask, why don't you guys try to sell to larger companies? Well, of course I want to sell to larger companies. Like nobody's saying no to that, but being realistic about what comes with selling to large companies. Now that I've gone through that process, maybe 3 or 4 times of not closing with different large institutions, it's easier to say no to it, or it's easier to kind of not get distracted, because whenever a large company says, hey, we want to do this, the tendency is to drop what you're doing and then be like, if they say jump, you say how high, right? And that's it becomes easier to push back on those things after you've gone through it. But obviously, when you lose those deals, it's not a great feeling for, I'm going to say weeks, if not months. You just pick up and you just move forward.
So, what's the reason that a lot of these conversations didn't end up closing?
Yeah, so those I've had first. Some of it's just like company politics. One part of the bank likes you because you're more innovative and they have a tech lens. The other side comes from a compliance and operational, and they have a preferred vendor that they've worked with, that they know, and there's deep relationships. Um, the expression that sometimes we use as a shorthand for this is like the buy IBM syndrome. Like if you're like back in the day when IBM was like the brand to buy for like computers, I guess. If you're buying tech, if you bought it from IBM, no one can really doubt you because they were the market leader and it gave you sort of protection. But if you went for like an unknown company, let's say at the time Apple, right, like that iconic commercial when they were used to, like back in the day it was Apple versus IBM, right? Uh, if it went bad at Apple or you chose some new tech, it reflect poorly on you, and it's a risky decision, right? So that's a really important thing when you're looking at who your customers are and why they choose it. Sometimes it's just our size. Like if we're like 10 people and they have more people, like literally they have more, I'm trying to think here, like they would have more people in the meeting than we have in our whole company, right? Like easily. Like some of these companies have tens, thousands of people, and you say, okay, we'll sell you tech. For them, I can see like we might not be around or we might not cope. That's one. That's two actually. Three, we don't have a lot of experience shipping to large companies. It'd be our first company, and no one wants to be the first. So there's a few reasons like that. And for us, genuinely, like I think selling to large companies, you can get it done once in a while, but it uses a lot of resources on your side because your product becomes what they want as well, right? They can dictate your product development pretty aggressively because they're going to be your main, 99% of your revenue for the next 2 years. So, and that's not a great way to do it. So we push back for a few reasons like that. And they push back on us. Sorry, they push back on us for those reasons.
Right. So, have you just stopped really trying to pursue those leads and focus more on small business? And how have you been focused on trying to help small business?
I like to say that we opportunistically go after larger business, but what we're not is like naive or as gullible maybe as we were a few years ago. So it's just taking a very measured approach. And oddly enough, the more measured you are with them, the more they seem to want to do business with you. So we've had success recently signing them. It's kind of just like, yeah, great, we'll do it, but like not being cocky or arrogant about it, but not being overly like desperate as well. And it's been working well. So like we're looking at our second large deal now. Like we've won a medium-sized deal. Um, in the UK, they're, I wouldn't say well known by the public, but in the community of wealth and savings companies, they're well known. Um, and when that they've signed contracts, when we go live with them, that'll be our first medium-sized business. For large businesses, it's just being disciplined. Take the meetings, obviously be appreciative, but then when they start fetching you their ideas and 10 people with their ideas what you need to do, you can kind of just be like, right, I don't really think this is for us. And when you kind of have that type of discipline, they they either say, great, we got it, or it's not for us, and it saves a decision that would have happened maybe in 3-4 months. And the expression I use internally is that's like bad news early is good news. Just keep it moving. So that's kind of the approach we have now. Just be very straight with them, and any type of weird like, oh, we need you to do this. Can you do a free demo or what do you call it? Test, or can we run your stuff? Like, no, just say no. Um, and it's up to them. Like, they're in some ways more. They sometimes need you more than that you need them, because they're the incumbents and they need to show how they're innovating, and they need to keep up with the startups who are our clients. So, and you can't undersell yourself, and that's something that we've definitely learned over the last sort of year, is value what we do, value what we bring to the table. They got money and that's all they got, and we have everything else. So
Now, switching gears a little bit, what does a day in the life look like for you as the CEO of WealthKernel, an up-and-coming fintech startup?
is this like COVID life or like pre-COVID life?
Has there been a big? I mean, let's do COVID, because that's where we are.
Yeah, COVID life, like, yeah, it's a bit different now. Like, without going, we've had some. So I'm a father too. I have a toddler and a newborn, and so post COVID, we've had to make some changes. So I wake up, I pretty much handle my son in the morning. I'll take him out, wake him up, do all that stuff. He can't go to nursery because of COVID right now, so he's at home. So I pretty much stop working again at 10:30 a.m. Kind of be with him till like 1 o'clock, until he goes down, then pretty much work till like 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock when he wakes up, and then kind of balance him in meetings. And then I stop working again at like 5, then just do stuff with him, and then I work in the evenings. It's pretty much that Monday to Sunday now. Like it is what it is. And some of it just has to do with like personal situations where we've had some bad luck health-wise in the family, so we've had to make adjustments. Um, that's what the life is, and we're kind of happy about it in a weird way, because although it's a pretty situation, unlike some other people we know, uh, we're financially pretty comfortable. Work-wise, we're comfortable. Housing situation's fine. But hell, this would have been a lot easier if we were in Toronto with our family, because here we don't have that much family here, so we've had to make changes. And I'm lucky to have a company that kind of let people adjust and work around my schedule a little bit. So that's the schedule. Before COVID, I'm not one to work from home, so I normally work from the office, kind of your usual routine, and evenings a lot after my son goes to sleep. So yeah.
So I don't know if we touched on this earlier, but I'm very curious as to why you ended up staying in the UK. If, as you said, it would have been easier family-wise, possibly if you come to Toronto, to Canada.
I didn't think about COVID. Right? Like,
Yeah.
yeah, it would have been easier. It's just there's a few reasons. Like our company is it's an opportunity of not just tech but also regulatory changes. And my network here got, it's weird. Even though I'm from Toronto, and all my close friends are in Toronto, because I studied in Montreal, my university network's there, and I don't speak a word of French, so um, they really want to stay there. And I came here, I did my master's, and then I got a job at Barclays. And you don't say no to Barclays, so it's here. And I thought, okay, I'll come back. And then kind of one thing led to another career-wise. Things started going really well. Barclays was really good to me. Like I just started the graduate program here, nothing fancy. Um, then 5 years kind of pass, and then this opportunity comes up, so I'm not really leaving. If it wasn't for WealthKernel, I'd probably be back on a one-way flight right now. Um, but but hopefully the world gets smaller. Well, maybe not post-COVID, but yeah, it is what it is. So you're here.
Yeah. So
And I don't want to make the UK sound like a bad place. We have great friends and there's things to do here. Like I live in central London. It's fantastic. It's a great quality of life, but you can't really replace family. And Canada has some really good things about it. Like now that you've been here for so long, just space, sports, things that are a little bit hard to come by. But London being the fintech capital, like I kind of live between the city of London and Canary Wharf, like in that area. Canary Wharf probably has more banks in half that district than all of Canada does. Like just to put that to scale, like just the size of the difference for finance is pretty huge. Like no other place would they give someone as young as me. Like when I talk to my friends in Toronto, like I think you started by saying, okay, I managed X million of assets. If I was in Toronto, I wouldn't see that much assets until I was in my 40s. Like it's just a different thing here. Um, so it's partly because of opportunity. Now because of Brexit, we're opening an office in Spain, and I told my wife like maybe that's our next move out to Madrid, because that's where we have 4 staff out there, and that could be where we're going to next. And so we'll see.
And kind of switching gears again, if you could go back in time and give 16-year-old you any advice after doing all that you have and experiencing everything you have, if you could give 16-year-old you any advice, what would the advice be?
Huh. 16-year-old me. Probably said to probably just enjoy myself more as a teenager. I think I know it sounds kind of crazy, but yeah, like I'd probably say that's probably the most thing, is to be less worried about like getting out of situations. Just enjoy yourself a little bit more. I think I think you kind of look back at stuff in those years as teenagers. You're trying to better yourself and work hard in school wise, part-time jobs and all. But probably the only thing I'd probably say is just all that stuff can probably wait till later. I probably just would have told myself to chill out a little bit more and just do more dumb things. Uh, no, not less of certain dumb things. Okay, I'm not going to go into detail, but less of certain dumb things and other things that I would normally at that time would have probably dismissed as just unimportant. Probably done more of that. Uh, just put more focus on family around that time. Um, uh, yeah, that's probably it. Like I probably didn't have the average like teenage 16-year-old thing. I didn't just kind of mess around. I think you're technically part of Tamil culture as well, or no? Yeah. So you guys had that whole piece about like Tamil dishwashers and stuff. Like that would have been me. Like I was working part time at like in downtown Toronto after school and stuff. Probably could have told myself to be like, you know what? If I could do like 1 shift or 2 shift, probably didn't need a third one and just probably like chilled out more. Like I probably would have gone back and just spent more time with friends and family in hindsight. But it is what it is.
How did your upbringing? So you mentioned you were an immigrant to Canada, um, and then you're working very hard even as a teen. How did that background influence your career and what you've done so far?
It's probably one of the biggest reasons we got the money, because the guy that put the money in, I'm not going to mention it, like it don't matter, but the people behind this company, ETF, that's capital, like public knowledge. You can probably find this online and stuff. Uh, he's an Australian entrepreneur, and he sold his business for billion two. Uh, and one of the things that was remarkable about our business is how lean we were, like that sort of work ethic. And he's just like, he had some Australian phrase that I'm not going to try to repeat, but that sort of frugalness, how to work hard. It's kind of been, if you look at our financial statements and when they analyze it, like it's incredible, like how much we've done in such little amount of capital. And that's kind of been, if you plot that back to like working and all that, how we like saving money as a culture and telling people, that's probably one of the biggest reasons they were able to like, geez, if you're able to do this much capital, like I wonder what you're going to do with X amount of capital. Um, so it probably indirectly helps with the fact that we can weather so many storms as a startup. And being a fintech, it's all about being well capitalized, because no one wants to do business with you if you're going to go down. It's not like we're a photo sharing app or some type of consumer tech that no one looks at it. Our customers are other businesses, but not just other businesses, other financial businesses. So the people who are looking at it are usually very good at numbers as well. And if they get any hint that you're not stable or you're not, you're running a leaky ship, they're not going to want to do business with you. And that sort of control of expenses and managing money, that sort of hardworking culture you put in, people kind of appreciate that sort of blue collar work ethic that we have here at WealthKernel. And that's one of the reasons they took a big chance on us. We didn't just go like, they knew we weren't just going to take 6 million and go buy fucking ping pong tables and have like, you know, become hipsters. Like they knew that's not what we were going to be, and he knew that I'm not like that either. Like they're just, he knew that he didn't have to like put that into contracts, and there was no concern. I think other VCs would sort of stagger their capital, but with us, and I was able to demonstrate that. So I would say it's paid huge dividends.
Right. So it's really nice when you, the story kind of has come full circle a little bit with the hard work and the ethic, the work ethic, and now helping you with WealthKernel.
Yeah.
So before we end off, if you could leave the audience with one note or a piece of advice or call to action, whatever it may be, what would that thing be?
In terms of like speaking to your entrepreneurs that are like listening to this, or who am I speaking to?
So Tamil individuals who are interested in innovation, potential entrepreneurs, current entrepreneurs.
Oh yeah. I would say to many people, it's like, I know there's a lot of people who want to become entrepreneurs and they have side hustles and stuff, and I encourage that. I think that's really good. But if you believe in something, you're gonna go all in. My view on it is that you probably have like maybe 1 or 2 shots in life you can do that, where you can really just like focus on it. And if you believe in it, do it 100%. Don't just do it on this. I'm trying to just like, I'm just not for the people who have like side hustle Instagram businesses. I'm talking about people who like, I'm gonna quit my job and do this. If you're gonna do that, quit your job and do that, and just go all in for X amount of time and give it all you have. It's better to do that than try to just work at your sort of dissatisfied job and on the part-time do this. Years will go by and you won't do anything. If you believe in it, just go all in it, and just have like a time and a number, or put aside some money that you know you can walk away with and pay your rent or whatever, and just give it all you got. And if it fails, in a few years you'll go back to work for some company. You'll make your savings up and you'll have another shot. And if you can do that, just go for it. Just plan ahead of time, like, you know, sort your financial personal situation out, your family, speak to your partner and be like, this is what's going to happen. We're not going to be buying a house in the next 5 years. This is what it's going to be. Get them to get on board, explain the situation to your parents and siblings, get them all kind of thing, and then just get to work and just jump in. But if you hit that point where you're running out of money or time, then call it quits. But you've given yourself that opportunity. Don't try to juggle multiple things, because very few people are able to be the best at something while they're not giving 100% at it. It's hard enough to build a business without, juggling other things.
Thank you so much for sharing your experience, your knowledge, and your advice today. This has been a very insightful discussion. I've learned a lot, so I really hope that our audience has as well. Thank you again for your time today.
Sure, my pleasure.
Awesome. And for our audience, thank you for tuning in. As promised earlier, free stuff was mentioned. So if you like free stuff, you're going to want to stick around for the last minute or so. I've just shared a link in the chat to a feedback form. So we're actually going to randomly select one of the responders and you'll get free swag. So please do fill out that form now. It'll only take you 2 minutes just to kind of give us some feedback on the event. I'll also put it up on the screen so you can see that link. Once again, I'd like to thank all of the amazing people who made this event possible. From Shiv and Ara at Tamil Culture to Karan for being our awesome featured speaker today. Be sure to visit tamilculture.com to network and collaborate with Tamil innovators worldwide. And thank you again, Karan, for being involved. Be sure to check out WealthKernel at wealthkernel.com. And thank you, and to our audience, thank you for joining us. See you next time.